Are too many of your operators, especially new hires, taking way too long to hit their sales targets? And are your team leaders having trouble training or coaching the best way to conduct inbound or outbound sales calls? If you're having these problems, then you need an easy-to-coach process that breaks down each step of the call so your operators have a clear understanding of the proper steps to follow to increase their close rates. Hi, I'm Mark Carrier, and in today's video, you'll discover a coaching process that I created about 26 years ago that I've had a lot of success with, training tons of operators, team leaders, and call center managers all over the world. At the end of the video, you'll have an easy-to-follow coaching process that will help your operators increase their close rates to consistently hit their sales targets and KPIs every month. And if this is your first time visiting my channel, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way, when I upload more team leader training videos and tips, you'll get notified. Usually when you talk with sales underperformers and ask them where they need the most help, pretty much all of them will tell you they need help in closing the sale. And after you listen to a few of their calls, you quickly find that they're losing people in the beginning of the call, usually not long after hello, and most operators are oblivious to it. You hear them rushing through their calls, jumping all over the place, and not finding out if there's anything about what they're selling that actually interests the prospect. Team members, they need an easy-to-understand call structure they can follow for every call, and I'm not talking about a calling script or call guide. That's why I created the calling line, and just so you know, I've uploaded another video that outlines this call structure that you can check out. I'll leave a link in the video description below so you can find it. Now, the best way to coach the calling line is to do an exercise on a whiteboard with all the steps in your call structure set out like this. And when you do, make sure you place a yes above the line and a no below the line, as you see here, and explain the calling line represents the sequence or steps of a call over the time the call takes. What we're going to do in this exercise is track where the prospect is during the call sequence in relation to whether they will buy or not. Now, this process helps operators really understand the importance of each step of the call and how completing each step properly before they move on to the next step will increase their close rate. And this works whether you're coaching the best way to handle inbound or outbound sales calls, and with a few tweaks, customer service calls too. The only difference for outbound sales and customer service calls would be some different tweaks for the first few steps of those types of calls. Now, to show you how this works in a practical sense, I'll use an inbound sales call as the example. And the thing to remember when you ask a buyer to buy during the call is if they're above the calling line, they will always say yes, guaranteed 100% of the time, no matter what. And if they are below the calling line, they will always say no 100% of the time, guaranteed, no matter what. So whenever you're answering inbound sales calls, where is the caller in terms of buying in relation to the calling line, above it or below it? Of course, when a caller calls, they aren't usually ready to say yes to what you're selling straight away, and they'd be below the calling line. And because they are below the calling line, if you ask them to buy at that point, they would always say no 100% of the time, no matter what. Obviously, what we need to do is move them up above the calling line if we're ever going to get them to say yes, right? So before you answer any call, it's important to remember that most people only buy from those they trust. And people only trust those they like. And they'll only come to like you if you've developed some rapport with them. And when we think about that, we need to consider what this means with regard to the introduction step of the call. This is where you discuss the important elements of your introduction, things like thanking them for calling, using their full name, and using your name. But more importantly, start developing rapport by being real. Just being yourself, speaking with a smile in your voice, and being respectful. And what I mean by being real is to drop the fake enthusiasm. People are so over fake enthusiasm and can feel it right away. And when they do, they move further below the calling line on the no side, and that's the last thing we want them to do, right? So be yourself and present yourself properly and start moving your caller up over the calling line by saying something as simple as, "Good morning, thank you for calling company name. This is Mark speaking. How can I help you?" After the caller tells you why they're calling, you move into the intent statement of the call sequence and say something along the lines of, "Thanks for your call, Mrs. Caller. I'd be happy to help you with that, and I'll make sure you get exactly what you want. We have a lot of different options and some special pricing on that, so to make sure I totally understand what you want, may I ask you a few questions?" This also helps build more rapport by showing genuine interest in what the caller wants and gives you permission to ask questions to help you understand what they really want so you can customize your presentation and specifically speak to what they want the product to do for them. Handling your introduction this way shows you're genuinely interested in helping them get what they want and helps you build rapport to move them up above the calling line. In the discovery phase, we start to learn what is important to the caller, and by asking the right questions in the right sequence, we'll get to understand what the caller wants your product or service to do for them. And by asking relevant questions in a friendly manner that shows genuine interest, callers will feel that you're trying to help them rather than sell them, which makes them more open and comfortable speaking with you. We also drill down on the answers to our discovery questions to understand not only what is important to them, but why it's important to them. This is crucial because when we are in the presentation part of the call, we can use the consumer intelligence we've learned from our discovery to personalize our presentation in a way that speaks to the benefits that are important to them and confirm these benefits with trial closes. Here's an example of what I mean. So it needs to be that particular color. If you don't mind me asking, why is that? And they'll say, well, that's the best color that goes with my outfit, and it would look absolutely stunning at this work function I need to get to. You say, oh, I totally get it. And a work function sounds like fun. When is it? And, of course, you follow this intelligence to use later in the presentation phase of the call. Now, when you conduct your discovery and drill down this way, your caller will feel you're generally interested in what they want and that you want to make sure they get exactly what they want. And because they feel this way, they will move up higher above the calling line. Always remember, people want to know how much you care before they care about how much you know. Now, all we have to do is show them how what we're selling will give them what they want. To do this, keep your presentation focused on their needs and wants, not your needs and wants. You do this whenever you mention a feature that addresses what they want by describing the benefit they receive from this feature. Stay away from presenting features that the prospect has no interest in. If they're not interested in a feature, why give them an excuse to use that as their "I'm not interested" objection? Okay, now, when you do a really good discovery and drill down, you can deliver a great presentation that focuses on exactly what they want the product or service to do for them. And with a great presentation that speaks to exactly what a caller wants, you don't get a lot of objections. If you do, typically these objections usually revolve around certain conditions, not objections, which can likely be handled with some negotiation. And after you've presented the feature and the benefits that are important to them, tie all that down with your caller to easily transition into the closing part of the call with trial closes like, well, we do have that in royal blue. That's the color you wanted to make your outfit stunning, isn't it? And once you get a yes, simply move into the closing step by saying, we have that in stock for X dollars right now and can have it delivered to you by X date. So you'll have it in plenty of time for your function. Does that work for you? If so, they then continue with, great. Which credit card would you like to use? Excuse me. Closing a sale is just the natural conclusion of a good presentation. Remember, provided you've established good rapport through your introduction and discovery phases, you should have established a certain level of trust. Provided you've presented the features and benefits of what you're selling in such a way that pushes their hot buttons, why wouldn't they want to buy them? Now, if you followed all the steps effectively, then aside from the cost, they'll say yes, wouldn't they? And remember, too, If it just comes down to the money, you're still very close to a sale. And another important thing to remember when you're in the closing part of your call is that after you ask the caller to buy, they will automatically drop down closer to the calling line no matter what. But if they are still above the calling line, they will always say yes, 100% of the time guaranteed. So with this in mind, you need to be sure that you've driven them up over the calling line as high as you can during the discovery and presentation phases of the call. So when you ask them to buy and they drop down, they're still above the calling line. The problem most operators have is that they just go from the introduction part of the call straight to the presentation and miss out on the most important steps in between. And because they haven't had an opportunity to build enough rapport or get a really clear understanding of what the caller wants, they can't present the product or service in a way that really speaks to what the caller wants. Missing out on these steps is the biggest reason why most sales are lost and why operators think they need help with their closing skills. The truth is, it's got nothing to do with improving their closing skills, because without these critical steps, they aren't properly prepared and haven't earned the right to ask for the sale. This is a good time to discuss one of the biggest problems underperformers create for themselves by just barreling through their call without paying attention to how prospects are responding and running into objections like "I'm not interested" and losing a sales opportunity. To really help them understand the importance of following the call sequence properly and not moving from one part of the call to the next until the prospect is ready, is by taking them through this simple exercise. Start off by asking them how they know when to stop and go when driving their car and coming to lights at an intersection. Naturally, they'll tell you that they know when to stop because the light turns red, and when the light turns green, they can continue. Then ask them what happens if they ignore red lights and just keep driving through the intersection. Of course, they're going to say that you'll probably have a crash. Then you tell them one of the main reasons they aren't closing better is that they're probably missing stop signals from their prospects and just barreling through the call and crashing. So they need to really listen to their prospect during each step of the call and only move on to the next step if they have a green light. This will make them very aware of how they've been conducting their calls and open up a discussion on the usual stop signs they come up against in each area of the call. And you'll be able to coach them on how they can get the signal to turn from red to green so they can move forward. I promise if you do this exercise with your team, it will really help them see the stop signals coming up in their calls and learn how to turn these stop signals green before they move forward. I'd love to hear your thoughts on coaching a call structure like this, so just leave your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you have any questions, just put them there too, and I'll be sure to answer them all, okay? And if you've liked this video, do me a favor and hit the like button below, and please share it with somebody if you think it can help them too. And I'll leave a link in the video description section below of the video I mentioned earlier on how to develop a coachable call structure like the one you've seen here today that your team can follow to increase their close rates and sales every month. So thanks again for watching, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all next time.